a decrease. We have all the information. We've had ample time to review it. So I suggest that we just vote on it. We do have a lot of things to go through, and this would relieve us of that.
I would note that remind us, I think, of information that Audra gave us earlier, and that there are a number of provider agencies that previously we had considered, like the Red Cross, Coastal Trans, Broadreach, Waldo County Action Partners, and the Knox County Housing Coalition, and we have been able to shift donations to them. We're continuing to support them, but it's being done through a number of trusts that are within the control of the town of Camden that were set up for various charitable purposes. So we're not
we have nothing to move on them.
Right. Yeah. So, but I'm just pointing out that's why they're zeroed out. It's not because we're not choosing to support them. It's just because their support comes from other places. Any further discussion?
One comment. I see the garden club is on there new. They're not asking for enough. Believe me. What they do for the town, make the downtown nice, the flowers, the wreaths, the village greens, all of that. They do a lovely job. I mean, I've always, you look at the intersection coming in town. It always looks very nice when they get that all planted. And I see that this is basically half of their budget they're asking for. I don't know if they have donations or if they do a capital plan, but for what they provide the community, I think it should be a little bit more, to tell you the truth.
John, you're talking about the Camden Garden Club?
Camden Garden Club, because they do a wonderful job for the community with the wreaths and all of that, and flowers.
What do you suggest, John?
I'm going to say 6,000 even, because that'll pay their budget. Because they do a lot. I mean, it's all volunteer.
I agree with you 100%.
And I know I'm not trying to be a spendthrift, but I do recognize what they do. Everybody should, what they do for the community.
You're very frugal. I agree with you 100%.
My only comment would be what they asked for and what they're budgeting for what they're doing. To just give them extra money when they didn't ask for it. It may be a very worthy cause, I don't doubt that at all, but if they've already got funding for what they're doing, that would be my only question.
Can we ask them, Ed?
Well, I think the next step is if you would like to amend the pending motion by changing that line item from 3,000 to 6,000, you can make that motion and see if there's a second.
Is there a second? Sandy, you want to second that for discussion?
Second.
So, that's what I was trying to do, trying to see if we could hear how their funding is put together.
You can have someone from the garden club come up. That'd be great.
Boy, I was just on my way out the door when I heard we were going to speak.
Trying to get you more money.
But when I heard that. Well, good evening. My name is Cecilia King, and I am co-president of the Camden Garden Club. Since 1915, the Camden Garden Club has provided much of the planting and maintenance of flowers throughout Camden. These beautification projects are a highly visible enhancement to our town. We, the Camden Garden Club, and the town, all are stakeholders in maintaining the beauty of Camden. Historically, the proceeds from our annual House and Garden Tour has generated the income to cover our civic project expenses. However, raising the money has become more difficult. Income from the tour has fallen, while the project expenses have continued to rise. We are concerned that our ability to fund these projects is at risk. Our largest expense is the $6,000 charged by our maintenance company for watering and fertilizing June through September. I am here tonight to request the town of Camden to partner with us by contributing $3,000 towards this expense. Every spring, we purchase and provide flowers and maintenance for 50 lamppost flower baskets, 3 Main Street footbridge boxes, 2 traffic island beds, the Chamber of Commerce bed, 2 Union Street arch boxes. Other club projects include the Village Green and Lake Beach maintenance, which costs $500, the tree program, which is about $2,000, And in winter, 98 lamppost wreaths and footbridge garlands for $2,950. The total cost of these projects is $17,220. Net income from the tour is $14,775.83. That is a loss this year of $2,444.17. The Camden Garden Club takes great pride in preserving the beauty in and around Camden. We look forward to continuing this tradition for years to come. Thank you for your consideration. And I have a little photo here which shows how way back when we had two men that used to go out and hand water our flower baskets. As you can all understand, that doesn't happen anymore. Sure, I'd love to pass it around. Yes.
So your total operating budget is 17,000. And you have projected income of 14,000, is that what I heard?
Mm-hmm.
Does that include the 3,000 that?
No,
That does not.
no.
So they got enough.
Any other questions, discussion?
I don't think so.
Do you have any reserve accounts?
We do, because in other years, the tour varies every year. But for the past 3 years, the income from the tour has ranged from $14,000 to $17,000. But in past years before that, like when we had our centennial, the income was like $35,000. So that's been a reserve.
The real question is, if we did allocate you 6,000, would you do more? Would you just be ahead of the game coming into next year?
Well, in all honesty, it's a really good question, and in all honesty, we have cut costs. One of the ways is by putting less plants in the baskets. So hopefully with this additional money, we would be able to add flowers. Yes.
By the additional money, are you talking about the $3,000?
If we had gotten
The extra $3,000.
If we got an extra $3,000, yes. That would pay for our watering and maintenance, which has been a big increase over the years. As I said, it used to be you could go out and water by hand. Can't do that anymore in Camden.
John?
The other thing is, too, there's several potential projects that they may be asked to.
That's right.
Do. One is the Washington Street, Mechanic Street parking lots, right? I understand there could be some, and then on the public landing, there could be some more additional plantings done there. So kind of give them a little bit of.
We'd have some wiggle room, yes.
Robin?
I don't know, I guess I'm just still thinking. I am struggling. I'm looking at what our entire, I'm from nonprofit world, I know every dollar counts, but I'm just looking at our entire budget and what it is. And when we increase things for things we aren't even asked, I just question that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the garden club work is beautiful, and I love the way the town looks, but I don't think that it's in our fiduciary responsibility to offer money for things that aren't required and nice to haves and what ifs. So if next year the budget is presented and the garden club's being asked to do more work, then they should, present it to the board, and we give them funding for what they need. I'm fine with this 3,000 that's clearly indicated there's a need, but to give over and above, that to me, on a budget that's already going up 3.5%, it's hard for me to explain that.
Any other comments, questions? So we have a motion pending, seconded, which would increase that line to $6,000 from 3. All those in favor?
This is just the amendment.
Those opposed?
Tried.
Thank you. We appreciate it, but we're happy with 3.
So the motion fails, and we still have pending the motion for $25,000 from provider agency. Any more discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
On behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank your Budget Committee for considering all of our requests and granting them, so
Yes.
thank you again.
Thank you, and we appreciate you showing up and being available for our questions, and sometimes things come up. You do a nice job presenting your materials, and it's easy to see what you provide in your materials, plus most of us are aware just from being in town the great work that you do. So thank you. Thanks, Ron.
It's always a town meeting floor.
Rub it in, Ron. Okay.
Maybe next year.
Give everybody a minute to bench.
Yes,
Pearl and Caleb.
Big scheme of things.
Have a seat.
That's like 1 cent for every person.
We lost everybody.
Okay, so you're going to do your presentation, go with that, and then we'll questions and discussion, and probably Audra will add a few things to that from what's going on in town. Okay, so all I know is this is Pearl and this is Caleb. I don't know their last names. They're from the Watershed School, so please introduce yourself, and they're going to make a brief presentation primarily about carbon-based fuels consumption.
So I'm Pearl Benjamin, this is Caleb Edwards, and we're students at Watershed. Watershed is very involved with town decisions around carbon emissions. So we do understand that there's not much in this current budget that we can change right now because it's got to be done with, but we are here to start a discussion for next year's budget. So if you could just keep an open mind. We just have some information to give out. So Caleb and I are students at Watershed, and Watershed played a huge role in getting the town of Camden to sign on to the Global Covenant of Mayors on February 20th in 2018. And in case you weren't aware, by signing on to the covenant, Camden has committed to a 3-year action plan that would push us towards becoming carbon neutral. The covenant dictates that in year 1, Camden completes an inventory of community-wide greenhouse gas emissions, and this step was completed by Watershed students in 2018. And in year 2, we will evaluate climate change vulnerability in Camden and set greenhouse gas reduction targets. Watershed students completed an evaluation of the potential impacts of sea level rise in 2017, and in 2019, we will evaluate other climate hazards for Camden, and we'll work with the Energy Committee and others to set reduction targets. So Caleb and I are in the global climate change class that's offered at Watershed, so we will be at the forefront of that little investigation into potential impacts. In year 3, Camden will prepare an action plan that specifies how it will reduce its emissions, as well as an adaptation plan that specifies measures Camden can take to adapt to the impacts of climate change. This step will also be spearheaded by Watershed students in 2020. The scientific community agrees that we need to keep global temperatures from rising more than 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by 2100, and ideally below a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase. Average global temperature has already risen 0.8 degrees Celsius, and the rate of change is increasing. Scientists predict that temperatures above a 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius threshold will have unpredictable and disruptive consequences for the planet, and dealing with the impacts will be prohibitively expensive.
Right, so to keep temperatures below that 2-degree threshold, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. These levels are recommended in the IPCC's most recent assessment report, the U.S. Fourth National Climate Assessment Report that came out in 2017, the National Academy of Scientists, the Green New Deal, and also Governor Mills is recommending that Maine reduce its GHG emissions 100% by 2050. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, the Budget Committee's recommendations greatly influence the town's decisions, and it can have a huge impact on the steps we take toward carbon reductions. Therefore, considering the fact that fossil fuels will become increasingly expensive over the next few years, cutting fuel budget is both cost-effective and carbon-reducing. So with this in mind, what are the committee's thoughts on either reducing the overall municipal fuel budget or reducing the budget individually per department?
Okay, thank you. Without commenting on whether our committee greatly influences the town decisions, I might ask Audra if she might outline a number of things in this budget that the town is addressing that I think fits some of the concerns that have been just raised.
Sure, okay. All right, so some of this we already talked about when the watershed students came to visit us a few weeks ago, a week ago. So steps in this budget, everybody's aware of that we've presented the LED street light conversion. That's going to make a significant difference in reducing the town's overall consumption of electricity and fossil fuels. The hybrid police cruiser, that's kind of a step in that direction as well. It's very much a testing phase for something like that. And we're going to be, frankly, one of the first towns in Maine to, start testing out police vehicles that are hybrids. There were a couple of departments where we did reduce the amount of, or the budget for fuel from this year to last. And I feel like I'm forgetting something.
Is this Sagamore Farm solar project part new this year? Is that?
Was that a response to the audit that was done in 2018, or was Camden on track to do a solar farm anyway?
I believe we were already on track to do that. Yeah. So there are a few initiatives going. Absolutely, we can be more aggressive in what we do. The select board's been talking about getting a company like Honeywell or Siemens to come in and do audits of all of our buildings to look at how do we make them more energy efficient. We've talked about things like using our trust fund to do weatherized programs so we can help people across the community better weatherize their homes, especially those who might not have the ability to make that sort of upfront investment because there's financial barriers. I'm the president of the Mid-Coast Economic Development District, and they ran a solarized Mid-Coast Maine program, which is a cooperative bulk purchasing of solar power that was available to any residents or businesses within Mid-Coast Maine. And we've talked about starting that program up again, and Camden would take the lead in sort of the marketing and coordination around that. So that would be a good opportunity to get more of our residents and businesses who are interested in investing in solar power, give them the opportunity to do it. We're going to start to talk with our neighboring towns about, maybe finding a site in Mid-Coast Maine that, is marginal land and would be a good place to locate, a good cost-effective place to locate solar on, and look at all the municipalities sort of investing in that. So that could be, a much more effective way of reducing our carbon footprint and, looking at sharing that investment with our neighboring communities as well. Great. So those are some of the things that we're looking at now, and we hope to pursue more aggressively, and definitely the budget committee would be involved in any of those decisions.
I've got a question. When it comes to equipment, it's one thing for a police cruiser to be hybrid. If you get into some of the big equipment, are there options like for dump trucks and other things that are diesel or whatever?
I mean,
affordable.
There's definitely, when we look at it, we could, there's always a way to do it more efficiently, but I don't think there's an opportunity to do like a hybrid vehicle.
Any other
anything as a community around? I know several communities have said they're on board for the Paris Accord, even though I'm asking about the Paris Accord, and that there are a number of communities who have said that they intend to stick with that in spite of the fact that our country has chosen to remove itself. Have we done anything?
Yeah.
In that?
So the Global Covenant is basically the town version of the Paris Accord. So we're operating on the same standards that we're getting from scientists that are saying we need to reduce this amount by this year. So it's basically the same thing, just with a different name that is meant specifically for towns. That's why it's the Covenant of Mayors. So.
Maybe close to a year now.
Anyone else have questions? Comments? Yes, Dick.
Our solar farm that we're operating, what savings are we predicting or have we accounted for already?
So I think, because this happened kind of when I first got here, so I'm not as familiar with it as some of the Energy Committee members who worked on it for years. But I believe it was a $2,000 savings per year. And then there's a buyout at the end of a 6-year period for 7-year period. Was it $200,000 buyout? For $200,000. And then if the town chooses to buy it out, then any energy generated would all be credited to the town.
The break-even is total out 10 years before you start saving money. Because the original payment on the kilowatt hours is about 2% per about 2 cents per unit for 7 years.
So you're talking about the monetary benefit. What about the carbon benefit from that? Has that been calculated?
I think it's 6% of our overall electricity load is offset by the current Sagamore Farm solar. Does that sound about right?
By the current.
Yes, the current one. So they're in the air right now is expanding Sagamore's solar installation. So I believe there's 3 acres that aren't covered by solar panels. With the solar panels on that extra space, it would be 40% of municipal energy.
Okay, so if Sagamore was fully utilized, it would cover 40% of the municipal town's electricity use.
Yes.
Have you guys looked at, in terms of building, any kind of new projects for the town, that we start to have green standards for house renovations, new house buildings, and certainly all municipal buildings, both new, like the school, and things like that? Are we requiring any kind of green standard meeting?
Well, I mean, we all have to follow the building code.
Well, there's a code, but then there's the ability to get a green
LEED certification.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about that with the wastewater treatment plant, with the projects that we're going to do there. And I think we're going to look at, solar on some of those buildings as well.
Is there anything going up on the roof of the new school? Maybe that's a Maria question. Is there anything being incorporated into the new school that's like on the roof? Because we can't use the roof of this building, so.
They're building so that we could put solar panels on it at a later time. We couldn't afford to do all of the green things that we would love to do, but we are doing sewer thermal, so we're tapping into the heating system at the sewage treatment plant, and that's going to be our primary source of heat for the building.
We have another name for that?
Structurally, the potential is there. Structurally, the potential is there, so potentially the town could partner with the school and do something up there.
Yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning that we budget 42,000 gallons of heating oil for middle school every year. And so the solar thermal means that's going to go down to practically a couple thousand. Or we're going to use propane instead.
Yeah.
But that's, over 20 years, it's practically, 1 million gallons of heating oil that will not be burned in the middle of Camden going forward.
So can you reserve that money towards solar, or will you take that money into school operations or something like that?
The money will be used in our budget. So it's not going to be, and obviously not an offset, it just means we'll have less money. We're going to have to pay for electricity to run the sewer thermal thing, for example, but that money will be dispersed into our budget. We won't see it as a revenue source. It just means we're not spending money on heating oil anymore.
So the taxpayers might see it, though.
We'll
get to that in a bit. Any other questions, comments? I have one question. So in year 1, there was an inventory completed of greenhouse emissions. Is that a report that's available at the town office or online or something like that?
I believe so.
have a copy, yeah.
I
Yeah,
wasn't.
okay.
I wasn't at Watershed last year, so I'm
Okay.
not sure.
But
But
Yeah, it was reported to the town.
Yeah, they
Okay.
did a presentation for us. Yep.
yeah.
Any other questions, comments on
I
that?
guess,
Yes, Lou?
are we as a town on track with this 3-year agreement? Are we?
So
Should be.
So, complicated answer to that question. So, the steps that have to do with inventory and figuring out what we're losing from global warming and what we need to fix is all going according to plan. So, our class is about to work with the Energy Committee and start the inventory of or actually, we're figuring out the impacts of sea level rise and long-term global warming effects. So that's all on track. But in terms of our actual carbon emission reductions, we're a little behind because so the IPCC is wanting us to reduce by 50% by 2030. So that's about a 5% decrease every year. We haven't quite hit that yet this year, and hitting that every single year means becoming extremely aggressive with reductions. So that means big steps. That means more wind power, expanding Sagamore. So it can't just be little things. It's got to be a little bigger to hit 5% every year.
Any other questions, comments? Yep.
Audra, is there in the plans on getting it into the town, are there plans afoot to look at, individual property owners and setting aside land for solar and, how that might be like a property tax consideration or just curiosity?
We didn't talk about it as much from the tax perspective, but we did talk about, like community solar projects where you can have investors from the community buy in, like somebody who has land available to do it, getting people who live in town that might not have land or roofs where it's, they're good candidates for solar. We did talk about those sorts of projects, but we haven't really looked at, so when it comes to the tax, it's considered personal property. So, we'd have to look at, is there some way that we could incentivize that through property taxes? And, does the state have anything in place to help us with that?
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. And I think the other side of this, which is, I think it's harder for everyone to discuss, is more of the levels of service. So, when you look at reducing fuel and those sorts of parts of our budget, there's a corresponding service reduction. So if we're looking at like a department like Public Works and we want to reduce their overall fuel consumption, does that mean we're plowing less or, doing other things that require them to go from place to place? So that's going to be something to grapple with as well. And that's a good question for the Budget Committee, because your main sort of points of discussion are, level of service, balanced with the cost of providing that service. So there's kind of offsetting what we consume as well as reducing what we consume.
Steve?
I'm curious, what grade are you, each of you in?
I'm a junior in high school.
I'm a
He's
sophomore.
You're a sophomore. Well, it was a very informative presentation, and I think everybody would say thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right.
Awesome.
I might need a few minutes to set Maria up. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we want to, I think the next thing we're going to do is try to finish the budget stuff. We'll do that. Okay, now for the main event. We have voted individually on all of these categories on the sheet that was passed around. And we are at the point where we need to decide whether the work we've done so far and the bottom line that we have here is what we are going to approve tonight. So we have two columns. One is the town manager's column, and then there is what the budget committee has voted on, the FY20 column. With a bottom line budget of $6,096,855. Any comments, motions, discussion? Mark?
There were two lines that were different, one 10,000 and one 40,000.
Yeah, so we had a $40,000 line added to pay for HVAC at the library, and we offset that with surplus, so it was neutral as far as our budget bottom line.
Okay.
There was a $10,000 increase for tree conservation reserve, and that was to put money aside with the idea that we were likely going to face more tree work needs with the encroaching various insects that were going after a lot of our mature trees, and not to mention we just seem to have a lot of mature shade trees that probably need to come down. And so that $10,000 increase in our budget increased our bottom line by 0.17%, which is the difference between the 3.35 and 3.52. Yes, probably.
This is more a comment, and it's something I'm struggling with. We, being on the budget committee last year, and I trust this budget, and I support the budget and what we've come up with, although I still have a problem with the fact that we put $10,000 instead of $5,000 into the tree thing. And I guess I would ask Audra about that, how she feels, because she had put in 0, and then we actually doubled what the department head request was. But when you look at this, it's whatever the increase is, total is not all that much, and it seems reasonable. Costs go up. But last year's budget over actual from the year before is $1.6 million higher. So we're doing a small increase, but we're doing a small percentage increase on a really big increase from the year before. And so that's what I struggle with when we're looking at this. And I'm not sure where to go back and change that. But last year maybe that's from years of austerity and not putting enough into the budget. I don't know where that is, but that's what I look at as.
I would say that we proposed a very aggressive capital improvement plan for this year, and given the fact that we've used our surplus to finance quite a significant amount of that, this is not something that's going to be repeated next year. And also given just I had a department head meeting today, and when we were talking around the table about the upcoming projects, every single department head had like a fairly significant project that they would be doing with the FY20 budget. So I think that when we come to FY21, it's going to be much more scaled back because a lot of them will be busy implementing the projects that we've passed in this budget, as well as the fact that we're not going to be looking to areas like surplus or the TIF to offset the expenses for capital projects next year. So I think that, and also we don't have a lot of debt falling off until 2023. So I think in FY21 and FY22, we're going to see a major reduction in the amount that we're allocating towards capital improvement projects.
Thank you.
You should see an increase in your operational budget because you got the potential ambulance contract, which you're not sure what it is, but it could be potentially another 100,000 or more over what's there.
Yeah, I mean that all depends on what happens with that and what our current provider wants to do and what the town decides they want to do with, a current or future provider.
But there must be a decision being made pretty soon here, right? On this, because a year goes by fast. As far as what path you're going to take.
Well, I mean, for this coming year, we're going to be with our current provider. We're going to be renewing our contract with our current.
I understand that, but I'm talking about the discussion that's been going on with Rockland. That has got to be decided soon, because if that's the path you're going to go down, it's going to take that year to put that together.
Right. Right. I mean, it's not like June soon.
No, but I'm talking,
Yeah.
it comes soon. That's what I'm saying. Next thing you know, it's next January you're looking at it.
Right.
Carol?
How are your actuals for FY19 coming in versus budget?
We're actually about right where you'd expect us to be at this point in time. And that, that kind of leads back to the discussion we had about, surplus and why we're able to utilize our surplus so much this year. So the FY18 budget, I think, there was a lot of turnover that year while the budget was being done. And so for some reason, wages and benefits were significantly over budgeted and revenue was significantly under budgeted. So that led to the surplus situation. And that's why also last year we were able to come in with basically no increase at all. And we're tracking very well against that budget. So it was much more realistic in terms of what our actual operational expenses and revenues are.
Okay, so you think you'll spend, you think that at the end of 19, this will be an accurate number?
Yes.
Forecast from last year, okay.
It's never perfect, but we'll be very, very close.
Other comments?
One comment, I'd actually like to thank you guys for doing such a good job with this budget. I mean, this is my third year. The last 2 years, I'll be honest with you, it was a joke at times. You guys have done a great job. I don't think I voted no once this year. I think my no record was about 50% last year.
At least.
Because, at least if not more, because I constantly heard the phrase "I don't know" constantly. So I want to congratulate you guys. It's a great budget this year. It was clear, it made sense, and it was to the point. So thank you.
Thank you.
Motions? A motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion that we accept the proposed budget committee's recommendation, 6096855.
I'll second that. Any more discussion?
She said 6.
Ready to vote? All those in favor of the Budget Committee's proposed budget for FY20? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so we've concluded the hard work for the year. Thank you all very much. And we're now going to 5 towns? Is that? Oh, both. Okay.
Child committee. Right.
No, they're the same.
Okay.
Just somewhere cut.
Casey, you can sit right here.
First question's how far are we going to budget? 20-30%.
Really gonna sit for that 5 hour. You could spend $5,000 more than they didn't ask for it for the ash board. But you couldn't spend $3,000.
I voted against the 10,000. Just saying. I think so. Yeah. I would have gone for the 5 to the 10.
They really are invested in this thing. I'll tell you, I've had some interesting conversations with years with these ladies. I thought they were going to kill me one year.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't it?
Ready?
Okay, Maria, take it away.
All right, I'm Maria Libby, the superintendent of schools, and we have 2 districts that Camden is a part of. One of them is the SAD 28 district, which is Camden and Rockport at the K-8 level, and the other one is the 5-town CSD. which is Camden, Rockport, Hope, Appleton, and Lincolnville at the 9-12 level. Tonight with me is Matt Daly, who's the chairperson of the SAD 28 School Board, and J.C. Miller, our business manager. I'm going to take you through 2 budgets tonight because we have the 2 different districts that I just shared with you. And if, you know, I have a level of detail. I've done this presentation to the Lincolnville Budget Committee, and we had a good conversation about it. It took over an hour, and it was only 1 district. For you guys, I have 2 districts, so I'm going to try to go through it rapidly because I've got to go through 2. And, you know, if you have questions, you know, obviously feel free to ask those questions. In some cases, I won't know if it's too much detail or if you're actually interested in some of the stuff, but I'll try to go through so we're not here until 10 o'clock. Okay. SAD 28 has a new mission that we did in our strategic plan, and it's just worthy of sharing, and it kind of guides a lot of our work. It is be kind, work hard, and keep learning. When we did our 2 budgeting processes, we had, you know, 5 basic filters that we looked at as we created our budget. And they were what is in the best interest of our students, what is needed for continual improvement, how do we prioritize quality instruction, what is needed to move forward on our strategic plan, and what is fiscally responsible to our taxpayers. I'm starting with the bottom line of where our budget ended up. And we kind of presented our expense budget increase in 2 different scenarios. One is without debt service, because the debt service so skews, like for the MET project, the debt service skews what our increase is. So without the debt service, our increase in the expense budget was 3.46%, and with the debt service is 8.04%. And the impact on taxpayers is 7.26%, which is pretty high for us. This is a 10-year spread. Oh no, this is our enrollments. I'm actually going to skip ahead to our budget increases. So this is our 10-year budget increases, and you can see in fiscal year 19, which is the year we're in, we had a significantly higher increase than we had in the past, 8 to 9 years. That is because of the middle school project. That's when that payments came online for us. And then this year is significantly higher because of the MET project that voters approved in November, which was an additional $5 million of debt that we will begin paying off in next year's budget. So the past 2 years, we've had pretty significant increases that are a lot higher than normal for us. And I'm just going to go back a slide. And again, remember, this is all the K-8 district. So the Camden Rockport Elementary School, that's at the top, and the Camden Rockport Middle School is the second one. And this is a 10-year enrollment numbers for our October enrollments for the past 10 years. And you can see that they've gone down slightly from 2009, but they've been fairly consistent the last 5 years.
Can I just ask a quick question? Have you extrapolated that out for what you anticipate in the future?
We have looked, I've gotten birth rates at Penn Bay, and I've compared it to our, the birth rates, and put that ahead to our kindergarten enrollments to see if there was a correlation between birth rates and our kindergarten enrollment numbers. Like when the birth rates were high, 5 years later, did that translate into high kindergarten enrollments? And it actually didn't. It was completely random. So it's really hard to project out. We have very consistently had incoming kindergarten classes around 70 students. And then we end up in 8th grade on average with class sizes of about 92 students. So we gain students throughout the K-8 years, because a lot of times the younger students maybe will stay at Montessori, they go to Ashwood, and eventually, most of the time in middle school, they start coming back to public school. So we tend to have an increase throughout those K-8 years. Yes.
How about the pre-K? Has that program's actually started, or is that a projected, or is?
We don't have a pre-K program in our district yet, and we probably will. The state has been going back and forth whether or not they're going to require pre-K. About half of the districts in the state have a pre-K program. We're in the half that doesn't. And one of the reasons in our town why we have been slower to adopt pre-K is because we have so many preschool programs in our town. And we've been sensitive to not wanting to compete with all the programs that exist and taking students away and putting places out of business. So it's, we need to think hard about the kind of pre-K that we offer. We might offer pre-K that's, one class of pre-K that is, based on some socioeconomics and some that aren't socioeconomically low socioeconomic students. But we need to think hard about it because we have so many pre-K and preschool programs in our community.
Have you been following it through the legislature? And if it comes down, is it going to come down as an unfunded mandate that will be required to do it?
We very well may be required. I don't know if it's going to be unfunded or not. You will see one of the things at the end of my presentation for the SAD 28 district is that one of the things we have not done in our budget is planned for pre-K for next year. We're hedging our bets that it's not going to happen. It's too late in the year for the state to mandate us to do pre-K. There's not enough time to plan it. So we didn't budget for it, but we do think it's coming, and we do think there will be a cost to us for doing it.
Yeah, we don't get any money from this. Well, we basically get no money
units.
from the state for anything other than some special education funding. Probably the pre-K stuff will be rolled out through the existing subsidy funding formulas, which means we would get pretty much nothing. So was it an unfunded mandate? Well, technically they would say it's funded. From our perspective, it would be, we'll have to find a way to pay for it.
So I'm going to take you through each of our lines. We have, I don't even know how many, 14 articles in our budget, and I'm going to take you through each article kind of quickly. Our regular instruction includes teacher salaries, health benefits, supplies, professional development, contracted services, and we have an increase of about 3%. Within our regular instruction budget, we have our normal contractual wage increases for our different associations, teachers, ed techs and secretaries, food service, bus drivers, and custodians. In addition to the base increases, many people also increase in a step system within that and get a percentage on the step scale. Only the people at the very top of the scale don't get an additional increase in addition to the base increase. We also have budgeted health at 8%. In this budget, for the SAD, we will know what health will be before our board has to vote on it. So we may adjust our budget, and it may not cost as much. 8 is the most it would cost, so we're hoping to save some money there. We do have an additional teacher in this budget for grade 1 and grade 4. Actually, the grade 1 is kind of a swap because we're reducing a teacher in grade 3. We are also we have an additional teacher in kindergarten this year and an additional teacher in grade 5, which we're not going to have either of those next year. We are eliminating an English language learner and reading recovery position. We have decreased pretty significantly our professional development. We do have an extra ed tech in our budget that for some reason, it was an oversight last year, didn't budget, although we've had the staff on staff for a long time. And we are budgeted for a new middle school math program. Next line is special education. That increase is about 5.5%, and that has a lot to do with wages and health. We've moved one ed tech from our local entitlement, which is federal money. We've had to take an ed tech out of that line, which is not local money, and put that ed tech into our local budget, which is a hit on the local budget. And the reason for that is because the services that are required for our students have increased a lot, and we need to use our title money for OT, PT, speech and language, and other things. So we just can't afford to pay for everything out of local entitlement.
Is that what contracted services are?
Contracted services are, like, we might contract out if we are inundated with psychological evaluations to determine whether students might be in special ed. We might contract out some of those outside of the district so they can get done. So there are things like that. Sometimes, I can't remember at the elementary school, we might contract out all of our OT at the elementary school and PT. So a lot of services would be contracted out. We don't necessarily have those people on staff.
Just for information, does the school district have a district psychologist?
Yes, we have one next year, and I'll get to that, but we have budgeted for a school psychologist in each building. This year, we have one that's shared, and then we have another person in a more of a director role, but next year, we're going to have one in each building.
And what line item does that person's salary fall under?
Ooh, that's a tough one, probably 9 to 12 instruction. I don't think that person's, I think it's a...
9 to 12 instruction.
I don't think it's a special ed line, but JC might be able to find the answer to that real quick.
K-8.
So I'm going to keep moving on. Oh, yes?
Question. The state is talking about a mandatory minimum raise for teacher salary?
Yep.
Are we at that level at the moment?
We're past that level. Our lowest paid teacher, I think, is 41 something, the current year we're in.
So that wouldn't affect us?
I'm hoping that that would not have an impact on us, because it theoretically shouldn't.
Thank you.
Yep.
You don't see a domino effect from it, though?
I mean, that's what I'm worried about, but I'm hoping that's not going to happen. Just because other people might be getting paid more doesn't mean that since we're already above the threshold, we also need to increase. It's going to be what I'm arguing for. So the school psychologist is in the special ed line. And then we have a line called other instruction that's for co-curricular and athletics and summer school. We do have some additional stipends for next year. We've got wage increases every year. People who do stipends get paid a little bit more. We have some athletic supply increases and some increases in dues and fees just to participate in leagues and have officials. So that's a 7.34% increase. Student staff support is technology, library, counseling, and instructional training. We had a 4% increase in this line. Again, the wages and health has an impact. And we did actually decrease the money that we've allocated for coursework for teachers out of our local lines and put a little bit more in some federal money that we get. But we also just reduced that overall.
Just looking through, and I'm guessing it would be here, and I even hate to ask the question, but what about safety, emergency response to threats? Where are we budgeting for any kind of...
We're not...
Police, all that stuff?
In this year, we did a number of things, and some of them at the high school. We kind of, we're always operating K-12, but we put in a swipe system at the high school now. The front doors used to be unlocked, and they are now locked, so there's a buzzer unless you're like I have a swipe, so I can just tap the thing and the door opens for me. Students have a card, but other people are buzzed in. So we did lock the front doors at the high school. We put a 3M film over the windows, in the doors, in the glass around the entryways, and around the offices. They're right next to all the entryways in the schools. That is a special 3M film that gives you 3 to 5 extra minutes of somebody trying to shoot through your windows. We have in this budget shared between the SAD and the Five-Town CSD is just $5,200 for an engineering study for a secondary egress for the high school and the elementary school, both of which only have one way in and out. And we're looking at putting a connector road between those two buildings so that they both have a second way out of their facility. So we're just doing that engineering study for next year. We did have some conversations last year about whether we're going to have a resource officer in our schools or one for all 3 schools. And, there was discussion about that. It was controversial. Some board members weren't supportive. Students definitely weren't supportive. And We had talked about sharing the cost 3 ways between Camden, Rockport, and the school system, each paying a third of the cost of that resource officer. It ended up not working out, ran into some snafus before it really came to be a proposal to the school. Their just budget and politics, I think, got in the way. But what we did decide to do, and we being Randy and me, decided that even though we might not be able to do that, they would agree to stopping by every single one of the schools every day, which they do. So they stop in.
Just a beat patrol.
Yep.
Okay.
So we've got an officer stopping in at every school every day and trying to kind of, hang out sometimes just in the loop at the high school, being a presence. And if people go by in the morning, the police are there frequently in the morning at all of our schools just for traffic. So we do there's a presence there, but we don't have an SRO officer. But obviously we've done some other things, and we've improved our training at the high school as well. They were a little bit lagging behind our other schools in terms of being trained for how to respond should something happen. So
Do you have it on the text messaging to get to parents and students?
we have the same system that we do our snow calls and everything else. So we have an automated, it's email, text, and phone. So the next line is system administration. This went down slightly. We actually did add we're adding a half-time position to our 2 districts, so a quarter time in each district. Shared position that'll be in the central office that is a communications and development director. So we did add that in. We did reduce professional development and travel, and we had some savings because of equipment we had budgeted from last year. So we had a slight decrease in this line this year. School administration is up 4.24%. A lot of that, again, is wages. A slight increase in secretarial time at the elementary school. And we also did reduce professional development.
What do you mean by reduced professional
for administrators?
Okay, and I should have probably backtracked with teachers too. So are they not taking classes, or how does that work?
Oh, no, they are. We put a lot of the money that we had in the local budget. We are planning to use that money out of our title funds to support teachers. Most teachers, if they want, are able to take 2 classes per year. Some teachers want to take 3 or 4, and we usually don't allow them to take that many because we don't. Right now we are probably spending $45,000 a year K-12 for courses for teachers. It's a pretty big line. So we just moved that money. For administrators, like system administration, we eliminated all of the professional development because our budget, we eliminated administration, eliminated almost $300,000 from the requested budget that came from the schools after the principals had taken a run through their budget and eliminated what they thought they could. It came to the entire administration, and we cut like $293,000 in order to meet the target that the board set for us. So in doing that, some of the things that, like literally I eliminated all my professional development. It's like, okay, we're finding every single place we can eliminate money in order to reach our target. So we didn't do that for teachers like we did it for administrators who are all sitting at the table, and we kind of wiped out our plans for next year. So transportation is, sorry.
What are you doing for like teachers being aware for health issues as far as mental awareness or all the other things they've been talking about? They're talking about the police being the front line. The teachers definitely are the front line too. Are they getting training to recognize those types of things?
They are. We are very aware. There just simply are increased mental health issues that we are dealing with constantly with students and with parents. And we have, in each school we have a full-time guidance counselor, a full-time social worker. Next year we'll have a full-time school psychologist. So pretty hefty amount of resources to address some of these needs. And we do some professional development with teachers on how to recognize what to do with suicidal ideation and other concerns that they might have. So we are pretty tuned in and plugged in to those things. We have in-school counseling through, I think it's still through Sweetser. It changes a little bit who the provider is. But we have the opportunity we have somebody like from Sweetser who does counseling in our school for students as well. They're not on our staff, but we give them space. So we are doing quite a bit.
Do you pay for that, Sweetser, or is that funded some other way?
Yeah, parents pay for that through insurance.
Oh, okay.
We just give them space. So transportation is slightly down. We reduced our budget because we're not purchasing or leasing any buses for next year. Our bus fleet's in pretty good shape. We are piloting a bus monitor on an elementary run. It's one of the things that I think in 30 years people are going to look back and think, how did we for so many years put a bus driver on a bus who's supposed to drive with 40 kids sitting behind him, thinking they're also going to drive and maintain the behavior of 40 kids. Is beyond me how we expect bus drivers to do that. So we are piloting at the elementary school in the afternoon run. Usually the morning run is a little bit quieter. Students are still half asleep. In the afternoon run is much more challenging. So we're piloting having another body on a bus to help control and deal with behavior on the bus. We also have 7 additional school days that we're transporting kids next year because our middle school calendar is really out of whack because we have to be out of the school by June 5th next spring. And our typical time that we end school is in June, late teens, early 20s. So we're condensing a lot of things, and they're going to school on some days when other students in our district won't be going to school. So we have some extra transportation runs. We also had a reduction in mechanic wages. Our office and maintenance budget is up 4.3%. We have some moving expenses next year. We will be moving out of the old middle school. We're adding 2 unisex bathrooms at the elementary school. We're putting $125,000 into our capital reserve. I already talked to you about the secondary egress engineering. And we also had to budget for a pretty significant increase in electricity costs. And it's not because of consumption, it's because the cost of electricity has been increasing pretty significantly for us. And we get these other charges. What are those other charges called? Capacity charges that have also been going up. So we had to budget more money for electricity. Our debt is going up 25%. So this is obviously a big part of the reason that is driving our overall budget increase. The bond payment for the MET building is $507,504 for next fall. And we also have an increase in our bond payment for the middle school next year, just a smaller increase. We have a decrease in the elementary school bond payment, so that will go down every year. And after next year, the middle school and the MET bonds will go down every year as well, although it will be a slow decline. And then we also took our kitchen equipment out of the construction project early on and put it in our own budget. And so we're leasing the kitchen equipment for the new school through this local budget. And our lease payment next year for that will be just over $18,000.
Sorry, that's instead of purchasing kitchen equipment?
Instead of purchasing it outright, yep, we're leasing it.
Is it a lease purchase or?
Yeah. Lease purchase, yep.
When she refers to lease, all of the things are lease purchases,
Yep.
so.
Yep.
Is it 5-year?
Probably
12 years?
For the kitchen equipment,
And we
it's
made it
12?
12.
Oh, yeah.
For cash flow purposes.
JC and I were advocating for 5, but the board wanted to do 12.
How much is the kitchen equipment?
140,000? Oh, 200,000.
180,000?
230.
230.
So, a summary of our total expense budget. So I went through every one of these lines, but that's all the lines just added up, and it comes out to 8.04% increase in expenses. This slide shows the percent of the total budget for each article. There's no question we have extremely high debt because we've got the elementary school, every school in SAD 28, every building, we have a bond for that's pretty significant. So we are paying a lot of debt. You know, there are schools who might not have any debt, or, you know, they're paying on one building. You know, we happen to be paying, and if you look at the whole thing, we're still paying for the high school as well. So we've got a lot of school debt, and, you know, in 20 years, we'll have a 50-year period without any of this debt. So
live through it.
if you live through it and can get to that place where you say, now we're going to coast for 50 years, but...
So when is the drop-off for each one of these, high school, the middle school, and the elementary school?
Well, the high school, and I'll get to that when I get to the high school one, but the high school, we already saw the drop-off, and I can show you that when I do the 10-year budgets. We saw the drop-off like 2 years ago, and that is when the state started subsidizing us for the high school's debt. And we had a negative 4 point something impact to the taxpayers that year.
So what year is that supposed to be paid off? The school.
That high school will be paid off like in November of 2022. But when that happens, right now we're getting 1-for-1. Our entire principal payment is being subsidized by the state. So when we don't have the principal payment, we also don't have the subsidy. It's going to be a net zero impact on our budget. The elementary school is like 2032 that the elementary school is paid off, and the middle school is, you know, I guess 2039.
Oh, yeah, 38, 39.
So those are all on 20-year bonds. So we have a ways to go with most of them.
Can I ask a question? Are we, you know, we saw issues with the existing middle school where we were keeping money out for maintenance. And are we, where we have these big bond payments that we're doing, are we also making sure that we're keeping up on reserves and whatever we need for capital equipment and for maintenance of those buildings so that we don't end up in a similar situation a few years from now where we have a building we've paid off that we're not, that we have been saving money by not taking care of it?
Yeah, I mean, I will just go on record to say I don't necessarily agree with that assessment. I don't think we are at the place we're at with the middle school building because things weren't taken care of.
That was just one of the stories I heard along the way.
I know. Well, you should hear the stories that the people who are working on our building and on our site tell us about the state of the building, that they are amazed it did not collapse on us while we were in it. It was so poorly constructed.
Okay, so I withdraw that.
So it's interesting, but I know exactly what you mean. I'm going to have a slide that talks about our capital reserve fund. We do have a capital reserve fund. It's fairly healthy. You know, 6-7 years ago we didn't have a capital reserve fund. It's really hard. I personally believe it's impossible for any school system to budget what it should for ops and maintenance, and it should be 2% of your budget. So 2% of our budget would be $300,000 a year.
It's 2% of the value of your building.
2% of the value
So
of
if your
the
building is worth $50 million, you're supposed to be putting 2% of $50 million aside every year, which is...
I mean, for the new school, that'd be $600,000 a year. And I don't think our budgets would fly every year with that kind of money in ops and maintenance. So schools are in this bind that, like, how do we get our budget passed, and how do we not get criticized for not budgeting for ops and maintenance? So it's a really fine balance. We've been working hard to build our capital reserve fund and plan ahead and anticipate things and be able to do that. And we did that with the new school. You know, we had saved the past 3 years $1.1 million to offset the cost of the new school. So we have been working to do that, but it's a very difficult task because no school can afford to put in what they really should be putting in.
But I've talked to our boards of our CSD as well about how important it is, even though things seemed cool and new, we need to keep putting money towards the capital reserve. So if there's something that happens that we are surprised by, we don't have to bump our budgets. As a result, we have the money there.
Yep, and you'll see that. I have that for both districts. So revenues for the SAD 28, do we have another question?
I thought we had a question.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm just curious, I mean, the high school building is 20 years old now. Have you done the roof on that yet?
Some pieces of the roof have
There's got
been
to be $1
repaired.
million roof on that building.
The high school, when it had the solar panels put on, had all the roofing with the solar panels on it all redone. So I'm sure it's in Keith's plan.
It's a membrane roof, right?
Yeah.
That roof.
Mm. But I mean, like, theoretically, the Strom will need a new roof. So we have money in the capital reserve probably to cover that. But it would be good to have Keith here to talk about it.
So the revenue lines, we have a significant increase in our tuition money. It was a little bit under budgeted last year. We have a few students who pay tuition to attend our school, plus we have a special ed student where that tuition is paid for the services for the special ed student. So that was a pretty significant increase in our revenues, and our state subsidy was our biggest increase. And again, we only get subsidized for special ed costs, but the state increased the percentage of special ed costs that they were subsidizing from 40 to 45%. And so we saw a sizable increase in our subsidy for special ed. So our revenues went up by 16%. When you put the expenses and revenues together, we get an overall taxpayer increase of 7.26%. The way that fleshes out between Camden and Rockport is that Camden taxes are going to increase 3.92% and Rockport 11.08%. And we have the dollar amount of the increase, the estimated cost per 100,000, and then the median single-family home, what the impact to the median single-family home in Camden and then in Rockport. The reason why the differential between Camden and Rockport exists is because you can look just to the right there and you can see the student count. Last year's ED 279 from the state, Camden had 391 students K-8. This year there are 378. And Rockport's went up from 331 to 342. So the split between Camden and Rockport is based solely on numbers of students from each of those towns. And the relative percent from Rockport went up and the percent from Camden went down. So therefore Rockport's increase was higher than Camden's as their share of this budget.
Is that adjusted every year based on population?
Yep.
Is it adjusted on an ongoing basis, or is it adjusted once a year?
Once a year.
Is it a 3-year average?
It might be a 3-year average.
I think it's a
3-year average?
Yeah, they change how they're doing things. I don't know if they still are doing a 3-year average, but it is once a year that it's updated. And we get a printout from the state that gives us our subsidy numbers, our student count from the date, or however they calculated it.
Does the state subsidy vary from town to town because of valuations?
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yes.
But in the SAD, right, Camden and Rockport do not get
We're minimum receivers.
Regular ed subsidy. So that's because of our property valuations for the towns.
What's that percentage?
Well, we don't get it.
Overall budget?
We get of our overall budget in terms of subsidy. That would be whatever the special ed revenues were.
Do you have the overall amount for our subsidy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember. 800 and
It's on everyone's revenue sheet.
$69,565.
So other budget information, the level of our fund balance at the end of last year was $1.9 million. It seems really high, but school districts are required to maintain the equivalent value of all of the teachers' summer salaries in their fund balance in case the district were to shut down and you could still pay your teachers for the summer, because teachers are paid from September 1st to August 31st or 30th. So the actual unassigned balance was $102,000. So like it looks like a lot, but we can't touch most of that money. We just have to keep it there. And our capital reserve, we project at the end of this year will be $250,000, and at the end of next year will be $375,000.
Do you invest that money, the $2 million?
We do not.
We haven't,
We haven't-
some of it was in CDs, wasn't it?
We have a high-interest checking account that we basically keep our entire balance in.
Because it has to be liquid?
That's how we've traditionally done
Because
it.
we don't want risk.
You don't want to gamble with it.
We don't want risk. That's really probably what underlies that more than anything else.
So what is a high interest checking account yield?
1.8.
1.8?
Checking account.
Is there a recommended amount for unassigned balance that you should have? That just seems low. I mean, you take out that piece that's to go to those salaries, and you're left unassigned. Is there a recommendation for what that should be?
Well, we have money in other reserve accounts, and so this is really just what is the result of us using carry forward and whatever. So the money can go up or down, but it's not a problem.
So what did that start out as in the beginning of the year? 102.
Well, that's what it was at the end of last year. So when we end this year and see how much money is left in our budget, it goes into the fund balance and we'll see what that amount is. There's a cap on it.
Right.
You can't have more than 3% over, it's more than 3% of that budgetary balance. You can't have it unassigned, can't be more than 3%.
The state
So they give
does
you a
not
cap on it.
want you to be sitting on a whole bunch of money.
Yeah, they just don't want us to stockpile money.
I have a question back here. Who do you guys bank through? Where do you keep your cash?
Camden National.
Camden National.
So we're not planning to use any money in our capital reserve this coming year. And we actually have a lot more than this in our capital reserve. We're just showing you the part that's not earmarked for the middle school. Because we have over $1 million right now in our capital reserve, but most of it is earmarked for the middle school. We'll have a capital reserve warrant article, which we do every year on the ballot, allowing us to transfer the money that we had planned through the budget into the capital reserve fund, and then giving the district permission to spend money from the capital reserve fund. So I just told you that we don't plan to spend any money in the SAD. Some years we do. We have projects that we know we want to take out of the capital reserve. Next year we don't, because we're trying to build up the capital reserve. But if we had some kind of emergency and needed to tap into it, we have asked to spend up to $200,000 without having to go back out to voters to get approval for that. So what this budget does, it adds a teacher in grade 1 so that we can be within our class size policy. We're adding a teacher in grade 4 based on parent input. We have plans for anticipated expenses for the middle school project and the MET project. I told you already, it nearly eliminates professional development for administration, and we increase the efficiency of food service operations. What this budget doesn't do is it doesn't provide for a possible extra kindergarten teacher. A lot of times in the summer, we end up having to hire an extra kindergarten teacher. If we get, over 70 kindergartners, if we get 74, we probably have to hire another teacher. We'd never know that until, August 1st, because we're trying to get the people to come in and register, and it's really hard to know. So we typically don't budget for it, and when it happens, we just absorb it in our budget and make sacrifices in other places if we need to. And we don't plan for adding that preschool program because we're hedging our bets that we're not going to be required to for next year.
So a question about the 4th grade teacher was added because of parent input. How does that work?
I'm going to let Matt address that because the board decided to add that position in.
So the administration looked really hard at whether or not the number, as it is, the 4th grade, next year's projected 4th grade is supposed to be within class size policy. The projected 4th grade is also apparently a very needy group of kids. So even though they were going to be well within the class size policy, and the administration felt like we had the resources to deal with it, parents showed it at our most recent board meeting and made an appeal to add another teacher to alleviate some of the problems that these classes would experience because the kids are so needy. And after a lot of back and forth and talking it out, and I encourage you to watch the entire discussion on the recorded meeting, the board decided to support adding another fourth grade teacher. So the classes will go from 21 and a half down to 18 and a half or something like that with 5.
What's the half student look like? Just out of curiosity.
They just they come and have breakfast and then they go home again.
So what is your class size policy?
For fourth grade, it is usually a minimum of 20 kids and a maximum of 23.
So do you anticipate this extra staff person moving along with the class through like 8th grade or something?
Probably through 5th grade, where we still have self-contained classes. Once you hit 6th grade, students start going to different classes for different subjects. And we frequently have class sizes, like the middle school has to contend with just the way the schedule works and different classes students are in. We always have classes that end up being like a science class in 7th grade has 27 students in it. But the rest of the science classes might have 19, 23. So we just live with that in the 6th through 8th grade. So we would keep that teacher through 5th grade probably and then reduce that teacher.
So I would like to get us moved into the high school budget here, and I'd really love to get through it by 1:15 or so. So if we can let Maria and company kind of go through things, a lot of the questions get answered if you just listen to the rest of the story or you read ahead a little bit. So if you don't mind, I'd like to move us in that direction. And I think probably what we're most relevant to our budgetary outlook is what shows up on the allocation of who gets to pay for what among the various towns and the allocation between those towns. So, Maria, if you can move on to the 5-town, that would be great.
Sure. So this is a 5-town. Again, we created a strategic plan a couple years ago that was guides what we're doing. The new mission for the high school district is a learning community that fosters intellectual and creative excellence while building strong character. Bottom line at the high school is the expense budget increase is 2.89%, which results, together with our revenues, to an overall taxpayer impact of 4.02%. Our enrollments at the high school have been pretty steady, around 690 for the past few years. It's projected next year to be 707, and that is an increase over where it was clearly, and that really is due to tuition students from St. George. St. George pulled out of RSU 13, which was Rockland, and they're their own district now, only at the K-8 level. So students from St. George have choice for high school. And like next year, half of the 8th grade class has chosen Camden Hills. We have about 35 to 40 or so students from St. George at our high school. This is our budget scenario for the past 10 years. And you can see in 2017, because of that huge surplus of money from the state to subsidize our debt service, our taxpayer impact was a decrease of 4.51%. Do you want me I could just go to the end and not go through each of these lines to expedite things if we wanted to, or I could just go quickly and nobody can ask me questions.
Just go quickly through it. It helps highlight the different columns.
So our regular instruction line, again, this is like the core of what we're doing, is an increase of 4.98%. We have a new initiative. I have a slide. The next slide is all about this new initiative called the Hatchery. We're starting an innovation center at the high school next year. Then we have our wage increases and our health increases. So the Hatchery is a really exciting thing that we're doing at the high school. We're launching it for next year. Our little tagline is where ideas are nurtured and hatched. And we have a number of components. We're going to offer coursework to students in innovation engineering and like these design studios. We are going to do a partnership with a school in Cambridge that is a school that only does an innovation curriculum, and they're going to send a person up to us who's going to help us launch our innovation center. And they offer a lot of other resources as well. We're going to turn our industrial arts space into a maker space, so we're going to redesign that space. and we are going to do a lot through the hatchery that integrates with the community. Probably not next year, but the following year we'll have cafe nights that will work with local people and offer topics that are of interest to the community and to our students. We are working with Pop Tech. We hope to have a speaker series that, again, is something for the community and for our students. We hope to offer courses through the Makerspace, maybe through Adult Ed, that are courses that people can come and learn how to use a laser cutter, 3D printer, all kinds of things that exist in the Makerspace. We hope that students are going to start businesses through the Makerspace. We hope that community members are going to come and use our space. We're going to develop, not next year, but hopefully the following year, a co-working space that's also kind of a classroom space. We really want to integrate the community into what we're doing with this Innovation Center. We have talked to a person who's working in the Innovation Office of Innovation in the Department of Education. It's a new thing. I'm trying to get in touch with Hannah Pingree, who's the governor. She's the head of the new Innovations Office for the state of Maine. We've met with people from College of the Atlantic, University of Maine, UNH, Pop Tech. We've been on Innovation Tour of Boston. We've been doing a lot of stuff, reaching out to help develop this. We're really excited about this idea. Special education, an increase of 8.95%. A lot of that is due to a single private tuition payment that we have to pay next year of $35,000. We are also reducing the contingency in our special ed department. We have a tutor who works in our Zenith program who's been paid through local entitlement. We can't afford to pay him any longer through local entitlement because of all those other needs I was telling you about with the SAD also exists in the CSD. So that person needs to move to the regular budget. Our Midcoast School of Technology program assessment has gone up just slightly, $5,000. I don't know if people can remember, but this was a huge change that happened for this year's budget. The high school used to have to pay Midcoast about $1.1 million was our assessment for Midcoast to operate. And then the state, in this year's budget, the state changed the way they fund career and tech centers. And the state is paying almost the entire bill. They're taking it off the top before they're spreading out all the money for schools. So they're paying for Midcoast. I mean, we're all paying through our taxes, but the state's paying for Midcoast. And the only thing that we're paying at Midcoast in the normal line is a little amount that they go over what the state says that they can spend. So like sort of the local share. And that local share is around $200,000, and we're paying $67,000 of that. So literally our assessment went from $1.1 million to $67,000. What was really great for us is that it happened, that coincided with the new building. It was the exact same year that the state, we didn't have to pay that $1 million, but it's the same year that we had an $800,000 debt service payment that we had to start paying for the new building. So we as taxpayers didn't really feel that. We saw a decrease in what's going to Midcoast. If the state hadn't started doing that, that debt service would have been on top of what we're paying. We would have almost been paying $2 million. It would have hurt. So it really was lucky for us that this change happened.
How many of our students are going to that school?
I wish I could give you an actual answer to that. I don't know the number. I'd say probably around 80 to 85 of our students attend Midcoast. We have a certain number of seats in every program. Like some program, there are 16 kids who can be in this program, and there are 24 who can be in this program, and 11 who can be in that program. And every program, we get a share of the seats. This year, we have filled almost every one of our seats in all of the programs, and we have kids who couldn't get into programs. We've really increased the number of kids who are going to Midcoast. And we'll see what happens with the new building. I don't know if the number of seats are going to increase or what's going to happen, but we'll know that next year because the new building opens next year. Student and staff support went down slightly. We had some reduced lease payments and non-lease purchases, all related to technology. We are really working hard on equity and trying to make sure that we have equitable opportunities for students in our school. And there are two specific things that are budgeted in this budget that are an increase in our expenses, because we feel that one thing that's not equitable is when all juniors have to take the SATs. Some of our students have kind of done a pre-test for the SAT, and that's by taking the PSAT. But not every student is able to take the PSAT. And the SAT is the state test. It's the test that's really important, obviously, for most colleges. So we have budgeted for the entire sophomore class to take the PSAT, so that everybody can go into the SAT having had a chance to see what it's like and experience it. The other thing that we're adding into our budget is we added in the amount of money it would cost for our students on reduced lunch to have free lunch. So they're not going to pay anything for lunch or breakfast. So all students on free and reduced lunch will get free lunch. We're also doing some other things that aren't costing money for equity. We're going to have a room that basically has free food in it for students, that they can go in there and take food whenever they need it. We're trusting that students who don't need to go in there and take food won't go in and take food. But we want a situation where students who are staying after school and they don't have the ability to bring extra food with them could go in there and get food. That students who don't have enough food on the weekend can go in there on a Friday afternoon and get food for the weekend. So we're going to have a room that has food in it for students as well, but we're funding that in a different way. So we're working hard to try to level the playing field as best we can. System administration has an increase, and most of that is because of that position. That's a new position, Director of Development and Communications. School administration has a slight increase, and really that's some wage and benefit increases, but mostly it's due to a single change in health insurance. Somebody going from not needing it to needing it is a big change in those lines. Transportation, there's really no change at all in our transportation line. Ops and maintenance is a tiny increase. Again, we increased the electricity costs, but we had a reduction in our contractor repairs. We're adding $75,000 to the capital reserve. We are asking to spend money from the capital reserve at the high school on 2 projects, and they're coming up. And the last thing's not that important. So in our debts, we did slightly decrease our CTE debt service because we're in our 2nd year, and those payments are going to go down a little bit every year because of interest. In the high school, we have a slight decrease in our debt service because we're not paying interest anymore. We only have principal at this point in our high school debt. Yeah, it's going to be paid off in 2021. I thought it was 2022, but it's 2021. So we're close, 2 more years. Our other costs, we had a pretty big increase, and this is because of the food equity initiative where we added costs to pay for food for students. This is a summary of our total budget, which our expenses again come out to 2.89. This is a list of all of our relative, the percentage that each line takes. And you can see the debt line here is 13%, which is actually still pretty high, but it's not like SAD 28 that was in the 20s. And this is because we do have the high school debt, but now we've also got the Midcoast debt. Our districts have a lot of school debt right now. There's no question about it. Our revenues went down slightly, and most of that is just a slight decrease in our tuition that is coming in, and our state subsidy went down slightly. Here's the slide that you maybe have all been waiting for. It's the taxpayer impact. So our overall tax increase is 4.02%. And you can just take a look at that for a minute to see how it breaks down per town.
So in this case, the breakdown is based on students and town valuation. Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, what JC and I really looked hard at this year. In Camden and Rockport, it's only student population. In Appleton, Hope, and Lincolnville, it was only valuation that determined the percentages. So in the high school, Camden's relative percent increased because there must have been a huge clump of kids in 8th grade, more of them from Camden, and they left the K-8 district and went to the 9-12 district or something because our Camden's relative percentage increased at the high school and decreased at K-8.
Wasn't there a shift in assessed values too? Rockport took a hit before.
But it's, in our ED 279, this was determined based on students alone. For the minimum receivers, the valuation didn't play into it. So the level of our fund balance at the high school is $1.2 million. You can see here we have a lot less unassigned balance, $14,000. For many, many years, this was a negative number, and we've worked to get this to be positive, and we are trying to grow that number.
Right, so in this case, the unassigned balance it's not a matter of it being too high, it's too low. We want to have more money.
Yeah, I mean, it is improving. 3 years ago, that was a negative $200 and something thousand. Our capital reserve is also quite healthy at the high school level. We are, at the end of this year, we're projecting $576,000, and at the end of next year, we're projecting $600,000. So we're adding some and we're spending some, but we're still going to have a net gain. And what were the two projects that we're spending it on are in this warrant article that will be on the ballot. And one is for engineering services for heat recovery. We are looking at trying to make some changes in the HVAC system to save costs in the long run. And so we're doing an engineering study next year, and then the following year's budget, we might have money in there to make these changes that will ultimately save us money. We also have our adult ed budget, which, the total budget is much smaller than our high school's budget. It's just over $400,000, just a 0.8% increase in that budget in expenses, and the revenues always match the expenses here. But because we got extra subsidy, actually the assessments to the towns went down, even though there's a slight increase. So what this budget does is supports the opening of the hatchery while balancing other priorities, and we're using some existing resources and we're adding some new resources to make the hatchery become reality. We're funding equity initiatives, and we are efficiently anticipating needs in technology and facilities. What this budget does not do, it doesn't fully fund the media position for next year, but the plan is to build it back up the following year to a full-time position. Our next steps with both budgets are to have the business office finalize revenues, make last adjustments. The boards will approve the budget. CSD is next week on April 3rd, and the SAD is April 24th. Then we have the town budget hearing for approval of the budgets and the articles on May 21st, and then there's a town vote on June 11th.
Great, thank you. I'll take two questions from people who have not asked questions yet. Anybody who hasn't
had a comment?
Any questions?
I would just like to say something.
Sure.
I mean, I just, having gone through this school system, I mean, I think the concept of this makerspace is a really wonderful thing, and I think it's really going to set our kids on a great path to succeed after school. I think it's a great initiative.
Anyone else want to comment? Mark?
Yeah. If I'm adding this correctly, between the two schools, the evaluation, the tax rate will increase $40.95 per 100,000 valuation. We've added the $23.65 from the K through 8 and the $17.30 for the
Yep.
high school.
Per 100,000, yep.
So approximately $41 per 100,000.
Yep.
It's actually less than you said originally with the debt service.
In there?
Both of them?
Yep, debt service is in there.
The original number for the other school was 88, wasn't it?
For the MET,
Yeah, for the new building?
I don't think it was that high. I think we had projected in the 40s.
Not the MET, the new building.
Oh, the new-
building was 100.
It was last year, so we already had the hit. That was when it was 17% increase. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
for coming.
you,
Nice
guys.
presentation. We have one more item of business. No, that's one more item. So this is not a necessity, but we have typically elected a chairman and vice chairman for next year, somebody for Audra to coordinate things with. Of course, he left. We could make him chairman. But does anybody desire to be chairman or wish to make a nomination?
I'm done.
Well, a lot of us are done. So, but we could still. Anybody have any questions or comments or desires on that? Sandy, you interested in being chairman next time? Robin?
Are you off?
I am off.
Oh, come on, you can
No, I can't. I have to be off for at least a year. At which point I will be changing my email or get my email. Or
Well,
John.
Kathy's vice chair, right?
And she is off too.
Oh, she's off too?
Yeah.
So we need to do both?
Yeah. How about Robin and John? Are you two willing to?
I'm just a peon. I like it that way.
You just want to ask a lot of questions.
That's what we're supposed to do.
I have been so impressed by the women here, and I think it's a woman's turn to take that job.
And Robin, I nominate Robin.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Kristen, how would you like to?
I'm off. I'm done.
All right. So we have a motion made and seconded for Robin to serve as chair.
I seconded it.
All right. And all those in favor of that?
There you go, Robin. Good job.
I think we can leave the vice chair position till your next meeting when you've got
Blood.
more. Right, that's a nice way to put it. So, yes, John.
We need some bodies. We've got a couple of committees. One is the Charter Commission. That we need some folks to run for, and some people are getting off this. Great thing for you to be involved in your town. You've got to June 12th to get papers turned in? Something? April 12th, I mean. And nomination
I have a
papers.
nomination paper here, so if anybody would like to sign it for me.
We need 6 people from the community to run. And it's to review the charter for the town. It's important. And it's worthwhile. I think you do a great job.
You're off.
Committees like that we should be aware of.
That's the chair. I'm only promoting the.
Any other committees where we should promote people showing interest?
No, that should be pretty good right now. I think so.
And if you know anybody who you think ought to be on the budget committee,
Who's the budget nominating committee?
Someone.
'Cause that's
Chip and Debbie Dodge.
yeah, Debbie Dodge.
Debbie's got a whole list, Pete said. Last time I talked to her.
I was only nominated to fill a one-year position.
well,
Well, you gotta have a year off before you go back on, though.
no.
No?
Yes.
I only did a one-year term.
1 year now, I'm going to.
Yeah, you can serve again. You can serve again. You don't get on one year?
Yeah, I was nominated to take over a one-year.
So you can go with that.
Can I before you adjourn?
Yeah. You better check on that before you.
So it's
you want to come back?
Charter Commission?
So eventually pick them up your
America, great, no, that's America. That was great.
Second.
Okay.
All those in favor?